it's very easy to be reviewing all tier 10 tanks and where they sit in the meta and what the community also thinks of them and how well they perform in battle. Um, but yeah, we'll start from the top. Uh, so the Ho-Ri type 2 is a solid tank. It's got a great gun. It's got great armor. Uh, but it's very easy to pen regarding like all types of tanks using heat, APCR, whatever. Uh, Overall, it's a good tank. Um, Overall, I think it would sit in the good tier because it is currently in the meta for tournaments as well. If they need a heavy gun over a long distance, that would be a tank to pick. Next tank, STB1. The STB1 I currently have in my garage. It's a great tank. There's barely anything wrong with it. It's magnificent hull down. It's got great gun depression to go with it. And its turret armor when hull down is very good, except some minor spots where you can pen quite comfortably if you know where to aim. Um, but for a tech tree tank, this tank I gotta put in OP because it's a tank that I use to do ratings as well as standard gameplay. It's a fun tank, and I would definitely recommend getting the STB1, even though it's a pain in the backside to actually grind for this tank. But I managed to do it quite comfortably, so it all depends on how well you play, I guess. Alright, next tank. I'm gonna say the Vickers Light. The Vickers Light, the most recent one to come out. I'm going to put it in OP because its DPM is insane. Its gun depression is good. Its turret armor is honestly a bit too much, honestly. Uh, I would, I can see it possibly being nerfed in the near future. But at the moment, it's at the top of all lights, including the Sheridan, and it just performs so well in battle. And yeah, its gun's just amazing. Its maneuverability is great as well. But overall, it's a very good tank. Next up, may as well do the Death Star, ever since the damage got nerfed, it's a bad tank overall, just because of its super long reload, but it hits like an absolute truck. But when it comes to it in ratings and meta and whatnot, it's a bad tank, but it's definitely full of firepower still. Next up, we'll do the 121. The WZ-121's a very good tank. It's got, I think, an 8-second reload for 400 alpha damage or just below. It's got solid armor, and it's great for face hugging, except the cupola, or whether the tank's low enough to actually shoot on top of the upper plate, sorry. Uh, the tank itself is a very good tank. I don't have it, but I know a lot of people who do, and they really thoroughly enjoy it. And I'm going to put this in the good tier. Uh, and it's definitely a tank that I'm definitely going to be planning to get before a lot of these other tanks here. Alright, next tank. Let's say the good old Jolly Mouse. It's a good tank. Armor is great. Angling, it's so damn hard to pen when it's angling if you're not having a high caliber gun like the Object 268 or the JP 100. In meta wise, yeah, it's used in tournaments, but it all depends on whether there's hills or whether it's flat, or a town map, for example, like Himmelsdorf. Himmelsdorf, the mouse is used in tournaments somewhat frequently just to give that HP advantage, as well as just to brawl. But its DPM is not that good, It's one of the lowest for all tier 10s, but it packs the armor, so it doesn't need to have the best gun. So it just has the HP to keep your team alive. Next tank, the VK 90.01P. I'm putting that in OP because it's a pain in the backside to actually pen this bloody thing. Whether you're using heat or not, it's painful. Its lower plate is the best chance you'll have at penning it front on using heat. Otherwise, it's just red everywhere. Whether it's front or angling as well. But there is the cupola on top, which is pennable, but it's somewhat small, so it's actually very hard to hit. But the VK90 is it's very good, even though it only has like I think a 400 average damage gun. Um, but overall, it's OP tank, very OP. Next up, we'll do the Sheridan. The Sheridan, since its nerf, is still good. However, its missiles, maneuverability, and all the stuff that happened to it has been sort of, I wouldn't say detrimental, but it's lowered the average standing on where the Sheridan sits in the game. Uh, I'm gonna say the Sheridan does sit in good, but it definitely used to be OP, so it's on the right track to a lot of other tanks as well. Okay, I'll do the IS heavies, the IS-4 and the IS-7. Both great tanks. Both have different armor profiles, but both have a solid turret to go hold down with. The IS-4 has a bit more, what do you say, less, it's definitely ammo rate less than the IS-7, but the guns are the same. The IS-7 has slightly better DPM than the IS-4, but the IS-7, it can't side scope at all because of the angled front plate. If anything, it's better to face hug and just pray they're not spamming heat at you. Where the IS-4, it's face hugging, it's near impossible to pen unless you hit the cupola or have enough caliber to get through the front upper plate, which not many tanks can actually do. But overall, they're very good tanks and used very, very often in tournaments and rating battles, which can somewhat determine who wins or loses. But those are those two. T22 medium, immediately OP. Its armor profile is absolutely stupid. Its gun is absolutely stupid. And if anything, I wish this thing would be nerfed. Because it has super, super troll side armor as well. But it's a very, very, very good tank to get. And if you ever see this in the store, which I doubt, because I'm not sure whether it's a tournament tank only, uh, definitely pick this up. But as I said, I'm not exactly sure how you actually get this tank because I don't have it myself. But yeah, that's the T22 medium. It's very good in ratings, very good in tournaments. Alright, next. Let's go the JP-E100. The JP-E100, I'd say is normal. It's a standard tank, very massive gun. It's like the Death Star, but with a crap ton of armor. Its lower plate's very weak, but its hull is outstanding. Angling this thing can bounce a lot of shots, but it's very, very slow tank, and its turret traverse is crazy slow, so once a tank gets behind you, it's pretty much game over. But yeah, overall the JPZ is actually not a bad tank. Next I'll do the Grill 15. Since its nerf, buff, the Grill 15 has gone from, I would say, normal to being good. Since it's got more DPM now, as well as having a high gun elevation now, since it's a gun stuck on I don't know, wedge between like two pieces of wood or whatever, like a seesaw. That's the one. So it's just a gun that acts like a seesaw on the turret. It's a very good tank. Its gun is amazing with pinpoint accuracy, and DPM is amazing. However, it's paper, so you're going to get HE no matter where the hell you are, or which way you're facing. So, if anything, just make sure you're not getting spotted in this thing, otherwise you'll regret it immediately. E50M. Overall, the E50M is, I'm going to say, normal. It's a normal tank. When played well, its armor can be super effective. However, its lower plate is easy to hit because I swear it's like half the tank. It's very big and you can't really miss it unless RNG doesn't favor you. Uh, but the hull and angling in this thing is very good. Its turret is okay. It's harder to pen, but you need to use heat on some tanks to actually pen with whatever on the turret. But E50M, normal. It's a very good tank though, if played right. Object 263. Yeah, it's got the highest DPM at tier 10, but uh, I don't know, it's a tough one. It's bouncing between good and normal. Yes, it has a very good gun with good hull armor, but I wouldn't say it's like the best tank since it's got literally zero gun depression. And the only thing good about it is its front armor. Otherwise, you can get HE'd on the side somewhat comfortably by other tanks. I'm gonna put in good. Like, its gun's amazing. Its hull, it can bounce, but I wouldn't necessarily rely on it. It's a very fast tank, and I I would pick this up in the future. But yeah, it's not OP, but it's not normal, so I'm gonna put in good. All right, next tank. We'll do the E100. The E100's a solid tank, big alpha gun, good armor, very big lower plate to hit. Angling is very, very good. However, it does has its weak spots like the little part on top and just underneath the turret. But again, this thing hits like a truck, especially with HE onto a Batchat or a Vickers Light. That's immediately half the hit points gone, or just over. It's a very good tank, good armor profile, and it's yeah, there's nothing else to really say about it. It's good in every aspect. Chieftain Mark 6. I'd say it's OP just because of its gun depression and hull, turret armor. When you get this thing on a ridge, it is absolutely ridiculous to pen because of how well the armor angles with the gun depression. I'm not sure exactly how much gun depression it is, but I'm thinking it's at least 10 or just over 10. But its gun DPM is really good for a heavy at least, and because it's British, it also has a similar gun to like the FE202 and the 215B. But as a premium tank as well, I'm not surprised that it's in the OP list. But yeah, definitely get the Chieftain Mark 6 when it next comes out. Next, I'm going to do the Badger. I'm going to do it as... I'm going to say it's a bad tank, just because it's got very good front armor, but the one thing that really lets it down to be a bad tank and no one plays it is because of its turn traverse, which is absolutely god awful. So unless you're up against something, there's no way in the world you're actually going to be turning around fast enough to actually shoot anything. But its gun though is good, has good gun oppression, but it just doesn't have the armor on the sides or rear to really pack a punch. But when hull down, it's good tank, but it doesn't really happen that often though. Next up, I'm gonna do the 155, which is a good tank. Dual clip, hits like a truck with just under 700 average damage per shell, and a just over 20-second reload. It's got the armor, however, sides and rear are just HE galore, and there's not really much you can do about it. But the front armor definitely is able to bounce some stuff, but the lower plate, which is small, doesn't get hit as much because people tend to miss by hitting the ground or stuff like that. But when hull down, this thing can actually bounce quite a few shots. Um, but yeah, the Foch 155 is a solid tank. I don't see it used in tournaments or ratings much, but when platooned with this thing, it's unspeakably good. So, yeah. Object 268, same boat. It's got great armor, great gun. It's got the armor to back it up more this time. However, it's got the giant lower plate underneath, but this thing can bounce somewhat comfortably. But you don't just might want to make sure that you don't angle it sideways, because that would just give a nice flat spot for people to just comfortably pen shells. But yeah, these two are very similar, except the Foch just has a dual clip. Alright, next I'm gonna do the 121B. The 121B is alright. I'm gonna say it's a normal tank because it's not as good as the 121. But I'm just gonna say it's a worse version of the 121 because this thing doesn't have it doesn't have a similar gun and it doesn't have the similar hull, which makes it slightly worse than the 121. So I'm gonna put it in the normal tier. Next, the WZ113GFT. From my experience with this tank, I'm gonna put it in normal. It's got a great gun. It's got unbelievably good armor for a TD. But it does have its downside being very big and bulky, and its gun's good, but the big and bulky side of it just makes it very easy to hit, and its turn rate is not as good as some other TDs. It's on par with the JPZ, but not as bad as the Badger. Um, but yeah, overall, I wouldn't say it's a bad tank. It's somewhat decent. It performs decently well in battles. Uh, the WZ111 Model 5A. I'm going to say it's good, but it's not as good as the IS-7 or the IS-4 because it just doesn't have the same armor, but it has a similar gun to the IS-7 though. But when you play this, its turret armor is amazing, but its hull armor is somewhat garbage because people just heat spam you or just put standard shells into you. It's not as good as the IS-7, but it does pack the punch with a 460 average damage gun. But yeah. Next, we'll do the 113. The 113 I'm going to put in normal as well, just because it's honestly not as good as the 121. I would pick the 121 over the 113 just because of the maneuverability of the 121 and how well the gun performs on the 121. But otherwise, the armor profile is very, very similar, except the 121's a medium, the 113's a heavy tank. But as I said, it's comparing these two, they're very similar alike. They've got good armor, good turrets. Lower plate is somewhat easy to pen, but yeah, there's not much else out of the ordinary between these two though. E3. E3, I reckon, is actually an OP tank. Like, yes, it's not the most maneuverable tank, but it backs it up with the armor, as well as having a very solid cupola. Um, the gun on it is very good, as well as having the good armor around it to bounce shots. But yeah, definitely the lower plate is the weak spot on this thing, unless you somehow manage to pen it in the superstructure, which is extremely unlikely unless you have a very high caliber tank. But you definitely want to make sure you stick with your team in this thing. But since the recent update with the speed boost for the E3, it's definitely shot up from either normal or good to OP. Never mind. I'm gonna say it's good. I don't think it has the OP status as the other ones, but yeah. Next up, the 4202 is bad. Just it's got no armor. It's HEable everywhere. It has Hesh. That's the only good part about it. It's got the same DPM as the 215B, even though they have very similar maneuverability. So when you're comparing it to the 215B, the 215B is actually honestly better. Oh, I'm not sure whether it's normal or good, but it's got the armor um, to bounce, and hull down this thing can be actually quite lethal with the DPM it has. But it's like paper everywhere else though. I'll put it in. I'll put it in good tier. Leo 1, normal, HE magnet, good gun, very solid turret, good maneuverability. It's a reasonably balanced tank. That's pretty much it. The only reason why I'm putting it normal is just because of how easy it is to HE. Like, you can HE it with some very low caliber tanks as well, so yeah. 30B, good tank. Like the STB, it's got pretty much everything you need except a bit less turret armor. It's got a great gun on it, packing around, I think, either 320 alpha damage. I may be wrong there. But its DPM is very good. I'm not sure whether it's actually slightly better than the STB, but it's paper pretty much everywhere except the front upper slope of the tank and somewhat on the gun mantlet of the turret. It's a good tank, and I would actually recommend getting it if you need a tier 10 premium tank. Um, but yeah, it's a reasonably balanced tank for a premium. All right, next M60, absolutely garbage. It's worse than the M48 pattern, which is here. M48 pattern is normal, but this thing just has absolutely god awful stats to it. It's worse than the M48 pattern nearly every single possible way, and really would rarely bounce any shots at all. Um, and it's definitely the worst premium tank for tier 10 in the game by a mile. And I would not recommend getting this tank unless they magically buff it, which I honestly don't think will happen. Next, we'll do the VK72.01. Amazing front armor. It does have the weak spots on the left and right of the hull, so side scraping is not good for it. If anything, I would say going out hull first to get the gun around the corner would probably be the best way to approach it side scraping. But again, it's a rear mounted gun, so there's not much you can really do about it. But it packs the same gun as the E100, and has overall solid armor for tier 10 heavy. but its turret can be somewhat frustrating sometimes, being rear mounted like the mouse. But E100 I think is better than the VK. Next, running out of tanks. Let's do the E5. The E5 I reckon is actually solid. It's a solid tank. I don't think it has any flaws. It's got good armor, a good gun, good turret armor, barely any weak spots except for cheeks if you spam heat at the thing on the turret. Its lower plate's actually somewhat difficult to actually pen properly because it can be a bit troll sometimes. But it's actually not a bad tank since they buffed it years ago, where they messed with the cupola to make it better, so it's not like a super weak spot or anything. Uh, but yeah, when facing this thing hull down, this thing works like a dream. Next, E4. I don't see it that often, but I know it's a good tank. Has a great gun, great HE potential, a massive turret, which honestly is not as good. Um, but yeah, it's a fun tank, and I would actually recommend getting this. Um, but it depends on whether you want to get like the 268 or the Foch 15 first, which I think they're two of the best TDs in the game, including the Grill, which recently got buffed. But overall, it's a fun tank. Next, the Russian medium twins, the 140 and 62A. They're both great tanks in their own right. One has better DPM, one has better alpha. Both have similar armor profile, except the 140 is just slightly lower. But the tanks are both good. But regarding which one's better, I would say I'd lean towards the T62A just slightly. I'm not sure why, but that's just the tank I'll probably prefer to play with. But the Object 140 has a very solid DPM gun on it, which is more than the T62A. So they have similar stats, but one's better than the other DPM wise, one has more alpha than the other one wise. So there's that. But both good tanks. Progetto 65. I would say it's normal. Yeah, it has the quad reload, the auto reloading gun, but it it just doesn't have that gun potential to 1v1 other tanks. It's not a good brawler at all. If anything, you'll probably be able to get a full clip off and then you're dead. You wouldn't be able to reload once more, just because of how bad the reload is on it. But its alpha damage is good though. But yeah, it's somewhat paper. Its front hull armor is actually very good though. It's solid, which is extremely angled and can bounce shots. But if people are aiming at the turret, there will be no problem in penning it. Um, but yeah, down to 5. We got the ship on, as they call it on PC. However, it's got the triple clip, which packs 400 alpha damage each. I'm gonna say it's good. It's absolute paper. The only thing that makes it a great tank is its gun, and it's an absolute sniper as well. So you do not want to be on the front line with this thing, otherwise it's just going to be nuked. That's all I can say about it. But yeah, the gun's the only thing that makes this tank good. 57 Heavy and 50B. Similar tanks, both have different characteristics, different clip sizes, and different armor profiles. The 50B is a lot larger than the 57 Heavy, but depending on how you put them, they're both good tanks. Both good autoloaders for their own different purposes. So, That's all I really need to say, really. T95E6, I don't have this tank. Its gun is actually not bad. Its turret is not bad, but it has a mega cupola on top, which makes it very easy to pen when hull down. But otherwise, it's meh. I would say it's normal. I wouldn't say it's as good as some other hull down heavy tanks, like the Chieftain. The Chieftain Mark 10. Because the Chieftain Mark 10 by far has superior hull down potential, and I would say has an on par DPM ratio with the T95E6 in comparison. But last and not least, the Batchat 25 ton. Good tank, great clip, absolutely demolishes opponents with the clip it has, a triple clip. But you want to make sure that you're running around, getting the clip out and getting out of there, because you do not want to stay there while multiple tanks are in the same vicinity, because it's very likely that you're going to get targeted, because it's a light tank and it's also very easy to HE this thing. So you definitely want to make sure that you be careful when playing this tank. Make sure you get in, get out as quick as you can, as fast as you can. But other than that, I don't think there are any useless tanks at tier 10. They're all very good in their own right. However, these ones down here, I just think are not as good as the others. Um, but yeah, that's what I think of all the tier 10s currently in the meta. Uh, Please let me know in the comments what you think. Make sure you hit the like button, subscribe. But until next time, guys, I wish you guys all the best and good luck.